Antarctica is a continent traditionally considered lifeless in most people's minds, with nothing interesting to see besides penguins and ice. However, Antarctica is a continent with a history no less colorful than the rest of the world. Moreover, for climate, navigation, and trade, Antarctica is doing some very important work right now. In the next couple of minutes, we're going to talk about both that and the history of the continent. You'll find out what Antarctica would look like without ice, why it might have become a military base during the Cold War, and how Australia stole the continent's name. Let's start traditionally with antiquity. For 99% of its history, Antarctica was the most ordinary piece of land, indistinguishable from Australia or South America. Actually, Antarctica can be said to have kinship ties with these continents. Together with them, Africa and other territories. It was part of the supercontinent Gondwana, formed somewhere between 800 million years ago. Gondwana, in turn, was first part of the supercontinent Pannotia, and then the more familiar Pangaea, around 335 million years ago. So the western part of Antarctica is similar in geology to South America, of which it was once a part. In fact, in Antarctica, there is a continuation of the Ant Mountain chain, detached from its native home by tectonic movements, and the eastern part in turn is close to Australia and Oceania. Antarctica is even part of the Pacific volcanic fire ring. The southernmost and active volcano on the planet, Erebus, with a height of almost 2 miles, is quite active and last erupted in 2020. In general, Antarctica is not detached from the general world continental bustle. It is not an introvert, cornered in a corner, but a full-fledged continent with all the consequences. Moreover, technically, historically, more ice on Earth has been in the north of the planet, not in the south. Life has been quietly simmering there. Fossils of Glacialosaurus, Tritylodon, and other dinosaurs that once made their way to the continent have already been found. Additionally, in Antarctica, remains of plesiosaurs 40 feet long and weighing about 13 tons have been found, which are considered some of the largest on the planet. It is understandable that, at the end of the Cretaceous period, just before the extinction of dinosaurs, a mild, humid climate with an average annual temperature of 11.7 degrees Celsius reigned on the continent. That's just like London, New York, and warmer than Berlin. Everything changed dramatically by geological standards just the day before yesterday. For hundreds of millions of years, Antarctica was alive and green. Even when Gondwana began to break up 150 million years ago, it was fine. The continent was connected by land bridges to Australia and South America, but these bridges moved away from each other, much like Gwen Stacy from Spider-Man. And 34 million years ago, they finally broke apart. It would have been all right just to break apart, as the animal world has repeatedly demonstrated the ability to migrate in such situations. However, along with the rupture, the current, which previously followed from Antarctica above, looped back on itself, starting to run around the continent in a circle. On November 21st, the journal Nature reported that literally a couple of 100 meters of water between South America and Antarctica were enough to trigger the glaciation of the continent. Not only that, but new research shows that with the closing of the southern current around Antarctica, the ice age came to the planet as a whole, affecting even the most remote corners. So after millions, if not billions of years of quiet life, Antarctica took on its present form. The ice sheet covering the continent is 9 million square miles, twice the size of Australia, and almost as big as South America. It contains 61% of the planet's freshwater and 90% of surface freshwater. If this ice were to melt, the world's oceans would rise by 229 feet. Goodbye to half of Britain, Northern Europe, Crimea, and Australia would have a nice inland sea. It is funny, but in general, from such a twist, the total area of inhabited land on Earth will not suffer much because under the ice, Antarctica is a continent larger than Europe, ranking 5th on the list of the largest. Only it will not represent itself as a rounded circle, as seen on maps, but rather as a plateau similar to Australia with a bunch of islands. After all, the ice cover, which is as thick as 2 miles in some places, has pushed Antarctica inside the planet. To be specific, the ice presses so strongly that the continent has sunk as much as 1,650 feet down relative to sea level. Residents of New York, Odessa, and St. Petersburg should not worry. Despite touching photos and emotional manipulations regarding global warming, the level of glaciers in Antarctica is now changing only locally, and even more. Scientists have been airing their views for a couple of years now, claiming that global warming is actually increasing the thickness of the continent's ice cover. In general, when weather forecasts become accurate at least a week ahead, then you can start worrying about the rise in the level of the world's oceans.
This video is brought to you by Thorum. Take a look at these rings. They have rings made from 4 billion-year-old Gibeon meteorite and genuine 65 million-year-old T-Rex bone. If you are a fan of Vikings, they have Odin ring, the Norse god of war, the Thor ring, and all of them are crafted by hand. Head the link in the comments and use promo code LIVINGHISTORY to get 20% off a truly unique ring.
The first person traditionally considered to have seen Antarctica is Thaddeus Bellingshausen, whose round-the-world expedition came close to the continent on January 27, 1820. However, in reality, as early as 350 BC, Aristotle described the Antarctic region in his treatise, Meteorology. Actually, the name of the continent itself is a Greek word, literally meaning opposite to the Arctic, but this is already close to the modern interpretation. Since the time of Magellan, who in 1520 saw the Tierra del Fuego archipelago and assumed it was a separate continent, it was called Terra Australis. This name appeared in all chronicles and maps up to 1820. Australia itself was named New Holland from 1644 until Great Britain adopted the name Australia for its continent in 1824. Antarctica received its modern name taken from the Greeks. That's a historical quirk. The race for Antarctica began in the first expeditions to the pole and the harsh everyday life of polar explorers, which we covered in the past video found in the description. Here, we will focus on what happened back then. At that time, it was traditional for mankind in the beginning of the 20th century, the race for colonies. The USA, USSR, Sweden, Belgium, and Germany all made territorial claims to the Antarctic territories. In 1939, a German expedition threw swastikas at Queen Maud's land from the air, declaring the region a Third Reich colony called New Swabia, which of course led to conspiracy theories that the Nazis had built a base in Antarctica where they constructed flying saucers and trained Imperial droids. Reality, as always, is much duller. During World War II, Germany sent only 9 merchant ships converted into raiders to the vicinity of the continent. The only even remotely combative engagement occurred on January 14, 1941, when the cruiser Penguin captured Norwegian fishermen off South Georgia Island. Operation Tabarine is widely known, which from 1943 to 1946 was conducted in Antarctica by the British, ostensibly to search for the secret bunker 211 with Nazi submarines. In reality, the search for the remains of the German fleet was just a plausible pretext, while the main purpose of the operation was to build bases on the territory claimed by Argentina. This is what the British did within the framework of Tabarin, and declassified documents of the Third Reich showed that the Nazi regime was in Antarctica for only a month in 1939, and apart from dropping swastikas and installing surveying equipment, they did not do anything. All in all, no celebration. It started in Antarctica during the Cold War. In 1946, the U.S. Navy conducted Operation High Jump, the purpose of which was to build an air base on the continent. Of course, for purely defensive purposes, because penguins are known to be harmless only at first glance. 13 ships, 33 airplanes, and 4,700 people conquered the continent for a year. The result was the construction of one runway called Little America 4 Station and the death of 3 soldiers during the fall of one of the bombers. Not much, but no one planned to give up, and in 1958, an experiment was carried out in Antarctica, which the Pentagon called the largest ever made. We are talking about Operation Argus, which tested an interesting theory. The theory consisted of breaking enemy missiles in space to disable their warheads using the flow of electrons, thereby neutralizing the enemy's plans. As part of the operation, the U.S. went further and planned to create ionizing radiation, which, according to calculations, after detonation in Antarctica, would spread to America, making it invulnerable to Soviet nuclear weapons. 4,000 people and $9 million were expended, huge resources for those times, demonstrating the seriousness of intentions. From August 27th to September 6th, 58 south of the Falkland Islands, 3 W-25 nuclear warheads were detonated at altitudes ranging from 105 to 493 miles. It worked. Detectors did register a belt of electrons capable of disabling the warheads, but it did not last long and was not a reliable defense. The public, after the leak of information about the tests in 1959, was outraged at the presence of artificial particles in the atmosphere and the unpredictability of the consequences. Therefore, On December 1st, 1959, the Antarctica Treaty was adopted as a matter of urgency. It provides for the complete demilitarization of the continent, a ban on nuclear weapons testing, as well as the use of Antarctica exclusively for peaceful purposes. So far, 46 states have joined the treaty. Maybe not that many, but the main thing is that all nuclear weapons possessors are there. And to this day, Antarctica remains the only continent without borders, armies, and weapons. However, in 2048, the Madrid Protocol expires, prohibiting the extraction of any minerals on the continent, and they have been found there since the end of the 20th century a lot. After all, as we have already learned, dinosaurs, as well as other flora and fauna, were abundant in Antarctica. According to some data, only in the Ross Sea region, there are 50 billion barrels of oil and 100 trillion cubic meters of gas. That's too much to hope that the protocol will be extended without question, and in our lifetime, Antarctica will still become the center of geopolitical interests. See you again, folks.